There's the famous story of the person who came to the Kafka Rebbe Zochem Levracha. Some say it was to the Chavetz Chaim. No contradiction. It could have easily happened to both. And said, Rebbe, what am I going to do with my child? He simply doesn't want to learn. I've tried everything. I've tried rewarding him. I've tried punishing him. I've tried hiring private tutors. I've changed him from yeshiva to yeshiva. From the Aleph class to the Beis class, from the Beis class to the Aleph class. I've tried this malamed, that malamed. I brought him to so many people they should talk to him. Nothing works. He refuses to learn. What is going to be with him? And the Rebbe told him, let me tell you what's going to be with him. He's going to grow up, Yez Hashem Yisbarach, he's going to have children, and he's going to be just like his father. He's going to worry about those children. He's going to worry about why they are not learning. He's going to hire a bain from them. He's going to change them from yeshiva to yeshiva. He's going to try rewarding them. He's going to try punishing them. But he himself is not going to learn, just like his father does. In other words, you want your child to learn by example. Show him what it means. Show him what it means to come home after a hard day's work and to sit down with a chavrusa. Show him what it means to come home after a hard day's work instead of sitting down on the recliner and opening up a newspaper, which shouldn't be in the house. You take a sefer out of the Svarenshak and you sit down with the chavrusa. Instead of all of these ideas to try to get him to learn, learn yourself. If he sees you learning, he'll copy it. And if he doesn't see you learning, Enochanami, he'll carry on the good midas that you have to want your children to learn, but don't expect him to learn himself. Thus the pasuk says, Eila told us Noach, and Rashi tells us. Why doesn't the pasuk continue by stating who the children of Noach were, that they were Shem, Cham, and Yafes? Rather, the pasuk says, Eila told us Noach, and then goes on to tell us what a great tzaddik Noach was. So one shot in Rashi is, once the pasuk mentions the tzaddik, the pasuk also wants to mention his praise. Zecher tzaddik l'vracha. And another shot is that that's really what the children of tzaddikim are all about. Iker told they say shel tzaddikim are nice and tight. The main children of a tzaddik are the meisim toivim of the tzaddik. So the others explain the remez over here. The main b'siyata d'shmaya of children is not how to get them to do mitzvahs, but how to do the mitzvah yourself. It's interesting to note that the Sepurna says on Vayoyled Noach, Me'oz shehichru loichiach b'nei doiroi zocha lebon. It was only after he started giving musar leb'nei doiroi that he was zoch to children. In other words, as long as Noach remained isolated from his generation and did not get involved whatsoever, he was not zoch to children. In other words, if you want to be completely aloof of your generation and have no shaykhus with them, then you're not part of the chronological line of the world. Once he did get involved and tried by example to teach the people, to warn the people, come to my Shabbos table, come let me teach you Amunah, only then was he Zaycha to his own children. But perhaps there's another lesson over here as well. While Noach attempted to give Musar to a generation, his efforts were fruitless. They just had it too good, the Dor HaMabul. Although mankind no longer lived in Gan Eden, their lifestyle before the Mabul still resembled that of Gan Eden. Children were conceived and born on the same day. A newborn child could stand, walk, and speak right away. It never happened that a child died during his parent's lifetime. In fact, all parents would live to see not only their children, but their grandchildren. They possessed a normal physical strength. They were able to uproot whole cedar trees. They considered lions and panthers like fleas. Instead of getting weaker as they grew older, the teva then was that they got stronger as they grew older. They lived a very long life. They lived hundreds of years. They knew no suffering. How often did they have to go to work? Well, they planted, the Medrash says, once every 40 years, and the earth produced enough for the next 40 years. The weather was always perfect. No heat, no cold, there were no changing seasons. As a result, Noach's Musar fell on deaf ears. Why would they have to serve the Rabbeinu Shalom? Why take upon themselves restrictions like respecting someone else, thinking about someone else, believing in the Rabbeinu Shalom? For what purpose do they need Hashem? They didn't even need rain. They would say we have an abundant supply of water from different sources. The streams and the wells of the earth supplied all the water that they needed. So Noach tried to give Musa. Had the people needed it, they would come to the tzaddik for advice. If they were confused, if they were lost, and Noach's brachas would have helped them. But who needed a bracha? Who needed advice? There was no confusion. There were no problems. There were no tzaras. Instead of taking advantage of that and completely devoting themselves to Abdas Hashem, they went exactly the other way. Had the Dor HaMabul been Zoycha, they would have been the Dor of Kabbalah Satayr, the Shteit in the Zoyah. Via Geshem Al-Oretz, Arboim Yoim, so Rashi says, the first 40 days were rains of blessing to give them a chance to do tshuva. Those 40 days of rains of blessing, Reb Tzadok explains, represent the potential of Kabbalah Satayr that could have been Kabbalah Satayr. The 40 days that Moshe Rabbeinu went up to be Mekabel the Torah. Kabbalah Satayr is compared to rain, Geshem Tanif, the Pasuk says in Tehillim. Had they only done tshuva. But until the last minute, they refused to believe that anything in their life would ever not go the way they wanted it. In any event, so it's a generation like this that Noach tries to give mudra to. And one would think, what's the point of trying? What do you have to offer? What do you have to sell? Like that famous Maggid who came to Rabbi Yisrael Salanter and said, Rabbi, no one's listening to me. What's the point of my drashos? Rabbi Yisrael Salanter said that after all your hundreds of drashos throughout the continent of Europe, you got one person to daven a better Shemay Nesrei. Then you should know it was all worth it. And then Rabbi Yisrael Salanter said to him, even if that one person is you yourself, if you daven the better Shemay Nesrei. The Sipporn over here is giving us a beautiful lesson. Noach was only Zocheh to children after he gave Tzechacha to his generation. Of what use was the Musar to his generation if they didn't listen to him anyhow? And the answer is, his children were better. And when they saw how it bothered their father, when they saw the passion in their father's voice, when he tried to convince the people how wrong they were, at least his own children were better for the effort. And that's where the Sipporn says only after he started being Moishiach, his generation, was he Zocheh to children. He couldn't have had children that merited surviving the Mabul if he didn't first establish himself by example as a person for his children to see, who would cry over what was going on in their environment. The measurements of a teva, the length was 300 amos, the width was 50 amos, and the height were 30 amos. And then the pasuk says, there was a horizontal amma at the top of the teva. The Yetzer Hara explains the Heilige Rishon has two names. One is Samach Mem, Aleph Lamed. The other is Nachash. In order for anything to exist, it has to have within it some Kiddusha. Even evil has within it some good, or else it could not exist. The Heilige Rishon explained that in the letters Samach Mem, Aleph, Lamed, the Aleph and the Lamed are Kiddusha. The Samach Mem is the Satan part. In the letters Nachash, the Ches is the Iker Koyach Haravi, Ches that represents Chonetz. The Nun and the Shin are really letters of Kiddush. The Rebbeinu Shalom told Noach, the Dor HaMabul has reached the point where there is such blatant murder and stepping on the other person's existence, there is absolutely nothing that is being done good, that the world's right to exist is quickly diminishing. There's no Kedusha, there's no Tov whatsoever. It can't exist anymore. The Rebbeinu Shalom told Noach to build a teva from whatever good is left of the world, to isolate it from the rest. As a result, the rest of the world is left without its Kedusha and diminishes itself and ceases to exist. The measurements of the teva are the letters of Kedusha in the word Samach Mem Aleph Lamed and the Nun Ches Shin. Therefore, the teva was 300 amos long. That's the Shin in the word Nachash. the Kedusha of the word Nachash. 50 amos wide, that's the Nun in the word Nachash. Leaving only the Ches, only the Koyach Hara. Samach Mem, Aleph Lamed. The Rebbeinu Shalom told Noach to draw out the Aleph Lamed. And therefore the table was 30 amos high, that's the Lamed. The El Amma to Chalenim Al Malo, that's the Aleph. Leaving only the Samach Mem. Having drawn whatever last vestiges of Kedusha, whatever sparks of Kedusha away from the world and isolating them, the rest of the world was left with no toiv whatsoever, and as a result, you would have the Mabul. It will cease to go on as it did. The Teva had to maintain a balance of chesed with Mesiras Nefesh to neutralize the tumah and the lack of such in the world that was melting down around it. And that is why the Teva was structured where, for the most part, all that Noach and his family could do while everything else was melting away was be Mesiras themselves to feed others. The year in the Teva was a difficult year for Noach's family. They never had time to lie down and sleep for even one full night. They had to feed the thousands of birds, beasts, domestic animals. Each animal demanded its food at a different time, some by day, some at dawn, some at all different hours of the night. Noach and his sons worked around the clock. And we know what Rashi tells us, Vayishar Ach Noach, the Noach didn't even come out complete from the Teva, because once when Noach was late with food for the lion kicked him, and he emerged limping, according to one sheet in the Medrash. There were so many miracles that kept the Teva alive. Why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu have to arrange it in such a way that Noach and his family should have to work so hard for 12 months? Couldn't Hashem make just one more nest that some of the animals can sustain themselves? Or bring their own food in with them? The mere existence of all these animals in the Teva was a miracle anyhow. And the answer is no. The whole structure of the Teva, by virtue of its measurements, was the Metzias of Toiv that stood opposite the Ra around it. The destruction of the world was due to robbery, motivated by the ego, by the gaiva of the people. To become the builders of the new world, Noach and his family had to cultivate within themselves the opposite trait. There had to be a Mesiras Nefesh of chesed, of living for others, selflessly for others, non-tiring for others, abundant patience for everyone's needs, even though they're different and they come at different times. This was the key to their survival. And the emes, this should be somewhat of a chizuk for households, the Ezra Hashem Baruch Hashem, large families, where you have so many different generations of children. Children all the way on the top that may already be concerned with shidduchim, children at the bottom that you have to change their diapers, and all the middle ages in between. Each with their own needs, each with their own problems, each crying for food and attention at a different time in the night. And sometimes you feel my life is running by, and how do I cope with all of this? In a way, perhaps we can picture families of this nature like Noach and the Teva. There is a mabul going on out there in this world. There are weapons of mass destruction being created day by day, both in a physical sense and in a ruchniistic sense. We know that Mashiach is around the corner. What is the basis of our survival? Creating a teva of chesed, Mesiras Nefesh of non-relenting, non-stop chesed, continuously living and helping. And all we have for it is a taina from a child if we're ever late with that child's supper or that child's need. This type of frustration. And on top of that, we continue on with more chesed and more love. Let's view this as a teva of continuous chesed. It's not easy, but it guarantees survival. It guarantees an atmosphere of Kedusha in a whirlpool of Tumah. In a sense, it sort of neutralizes the lack of caring for someone else in this so difficult and menacing world around us. We Yidden, we have a different lifestyle. We live in a teva. It's not easy, but Lamaisa, we're living in an atmosphere of Kedusha committed to Chesed, while everyone else is going in the opposite direction. And ultimately, when we come out of the teva, we're on a different world as a result of it. The honesty of this concept of separating the Kedusha from the Tumah and creating a special place that draws the Hashpais from Shemayim, the Hashpais of Emunah, was well known to the Dar HaFlaga. The Dar Flaga who built this huge tower, the tower that grew and grew so high that it took a year to climb to the top. This tower that was going to support the world, or the way others wanted it, a basis to fight the Revayin Shalom Kaviyachal. The Ber Maim Chaim explains, these people knew a lot more than we think they know. As a matter of fact, they may have known a lot more than we know now. They understood the concept of the Beis HaMikdash, a place surrounded by Kedusha, that draws the Kedusha and the Hashpaz titles down to this world, and from there, if the world accepts it properly, it emanates to the rest of the world. But they didn't want that. That meant they had to commit themselves to the ideology of the Beis HaMikdash. A life of Chesed, a life of Kedusha, a life of Emunah. What they wanted to do, and they wanted to do it by actually using Shemeis HaKadoshim and understanding the Shemeis of Kedusha and Shemeis of Tumah. They wanted to draw the Tumah to one makar, to one capsule, to one basis, in such a way where they will establish a receptacle for the hashpais of Kedusha without having to deal with the Kedusha. And they wanted to play around with this. They understood the Kaiches of Tumah have Kedusha in it. They wanted to build something that would counter the Beis HaMikdash. Some type of a ruchniistic antenna that's going to receive these hashpais, bypassing the Beis HaMikdash. As a result, by taking away their ability to speak Lashon Kodesh, they were now unarmed. Their ability, their understanding of Shemeis HaKedusha and how it works was useless in the other languages. And as a result, they could not do what they wanted to do. It's quite fascinating to note that the Yaris Vasher of Jensen Eibishitz explains that the tower was actually a space station. The Yaris Vasher lived in the late 1700s, early 1800s, explains this. This is most interesting in lieu of the fact that the Zohar HaKadosh says in Parshas Noach that towards the end of the world, towards Mashiach, and the Zohar alludes to the years indeed of the agricultural and technological revolutions, Tarian of Chachma, certain gates of wisdom will open to the world, where the world will become privy to various different technological advances that, based on laws of nature and science that existed since Sheshes Yimei Bereishis, except the world wasn't privy to it, until the time that the gateway of Chachma opened up in Shemayim. And it's in Parshas Noach that the Zohar talks about it. So Rabbi Yonasan Eibishitz is telling us that the Dar HaFlaga in their time were privy to it, using it, however, as a vehicle of drawing people away from the Rebbeinu Shalom, and was taken away from them. May the Rebbeinu Shalom help that our homes should be Teves, islands of Kedusha, separated from the Tumah whirlpooling around us. Besides for the many sins of the Dar HaMabel, and there were many, including the worst, Avodah Zarah, Ritzicha, bloodshed, there were murderers, immorality, a man would take two wives, one for the purpose of childbearing and the other for his pleasure. But despite that, Hashem would have spared the Dar HaMabel if not for the sin of Gizel, the crime of robbery. Now, how do we rationalize this? Murder, Hashem would have looked away at. Avodah Zarah, idol worship, Hashem would have looked away at. The worst chatoim, they steep to the lowest behavior in terms of morality, Hashem would have looked away at it. But one person steals from another, that not. How do we put this into perspective? And the answer is, it wasn't just that they stole from each other. It was the way they stole from each other. For example, a man brought out a basket full of peas, and he would be surrounded by a mob snatching them away, and by design, every person calculated to take only a small amount of peas worth less than a pruta. You cannot take someone to bed, not even to small claims court, if it's less than a pruta. Now, as far as the man with the basket of peas were concerned, that's just a technicality. He was left with an empty basket. But he was also left with an inability to present the matter to any type of a judge. Everyone said, I stole less than the minimum amount, which would make me liable. Now, here's the problem. If you asked a fine citizen of the Dar HaMabel, when are you going to do tshuva? So his answer would be, tshuva on what? Well, how's about stealing peas? I didn't steal enough that it should technically be considered a liability. So So why should I do tshuva if my aveira is not an aveira? But the fact is it's not true. The Rambam says stealing less than a shava pruta is worse than stealing a shava pruta, because a shava pruta you can return. Less than a shava pruta you have the aveira of stealing and it's difficult to return. But that's not really the issue over here. The technicality of whether it is considered stealing or not is secondary to the mindset. The mindset of the Dar HaMabul was, we are not doing anything wrong. They rationalized, they legalized, they instituted laws, they made amendments to their constitution so that it fits them in such a manner that we are law-abiding citizens. This is just our interpretation of the law. And when you have this type of a situation, it's hopeless. When a person knows that he has hit bottom, so at least he looks up and says, Rebbeinu Shalom, when am I going to do tshuva? But if you think you're going up when you're going down, there's no hope. Why should he look to do tshuva if he's not doing anything wrong? And that's why the pasuk says, the public relations was excellent. It looked like these were really fine people. But Lifnei Elikim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was Yidei Machshava, explains the Ber Moshe from the Yerush Rebbe, he knew how ugly the dust was that was laying underneath the carpet here. And all of their chatayim, the Avodah Zarah, the Gil Yerayas, the Shvichas Damim, more so than the Yezera itself, the Torah puts into perspective what the real problem was. The real problem was Vatamoleh Ha'aretz Chamas. Now, what does the word Chamas mean? In describing theft or the taking without permission of another person's property, we have three terms. There is Geneva, which is executed by a Ganef. There is Gezela, executed by a Gazlan. And there is Chamas, executed by a Chamsan. Let's define these three terms. Geneva means in a hidden, clandestine way. The person who puts the stocking over his face and climbs up the drain pipe and jumps in through the window in the middle of the night to grab the pearls. He's the Ganef. Gazlan is the robber. The one who meets someone else in the middle of the street and simply pushes him down and takes away his wallet. He's the Gazlan. Chamas is used to describe a whole array of different types of seizure of someone else's property through an appearance of legal means. For example, if I go over to Reuven and I say, sell me your car, and Reuven says, no, I don't want to sell my car. And I say to Reuven, I really want you to sell me your car, and Reuven says, no. And I force him to sell me his car. I literally put so much pressure on him that he has no other choice. He has to sell me his car. If not, I threaten to blackmail him, I threaten to hurt him, whatever the case may be. And then I take out my wallet and I give him the book value of the car. I give him the actual value, even more so, for the car. I am called a chamsin. That is one example of chamas. Now, which one of these three are worse? On the surface, you would say that the best is chamas. He had no right to force Reuven to sell it, but at least he paid for it. Second best is the Ganef. At least he doesn't have the audacity to go over to someone in the middle of the street and to knock him down and take away his wallet. At least he climbs in through windows at night. And the worst is the Gazlan. What chutzpah to go over to someone in broad daylight and just grab that person's wallet out of his hand. But that Torah looks at things a little bit differently. Actually, very different. In halacha, the Ganef, creeping in at night, is treated more harshly than the Gazlan. The Gazlan pushes someone down in the street and he takes away his wallet. Even if he's going to rationalize that to a certain degree, he's going to say, no, he's so rich, I'm so poor, I'm a victim of social circumstances. But the bottom line is, he looks at himself and he sees who he is. He's a Gazlan. He walks down the street, he knows everyone is running away from him. People are looking at him. Here he is. Hide your pocketbooks, hide your bags, the robber. The Gazlan has put himself into a situation where he can't mingle amongst mankind. And ultimately, if he ever really wants to have friends, he'll have to come to terms with his actions. The Ganef, however, is in a way considered more sinister. This is a person who perhaps considers himself a reputable person, Who knows? Maybe even he sits at the Mizrach, at the eastern wall in Shul. But when no one is looking at night, he'll crawl in through someone's window. And of course, that's just a metaphor. Geneva comes in many different ways. There are many different ways you can put on a mask and crawl through someone's window. You can do it at a computer, you can do it by undercharging, by overcharging, by taking a loan and willfully not paying back. All of this falls into the category of the Ganef. The Ganef, he wants to be a good member of society. He wants to have his name up on the do-good chart. When there's a sign in the Besnedrash, V'eli Yamdu L'bracha, for those who helped out, he wants his name over there. He wants people to like him. But when no one is looking, he likes to help himself the same. In other words, you're worried about people, but you aren't the least bit concerned about how HaKadosh Baruch Hu views you. And therefore the Ganef, under certain circumstances, pays kefil. He has to pay double. The Gazlan doesn't pay double. But worse than both is the Chassan. I forced someone to give me something, and I pay for it. Did I do anything wrong? I paid for it. I gave him book value. No one could get book value for a car. He should be indebted to me. And in turn, who am I? Nothing but a Ganef. But a Ganef of the worst kind, because there is the least hope of this person doing tshuva. He thinks he did the other person a favor. And that's Kates Kobasa Balafonai, the Der Moshe says. Why is it Kates Kobasa? Why is it the end? Because Balafonai. Because it's a sin that's only Lafonai, only in front of me. To everyone else, he looks like such a fine person. There's no hope over here. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will have all the patience in the world to wait for someone to do tshuva. But if someone thinks that he's a tzaddik, when he's actually undermining someone else's essence, what hope is there for him to repent? The tzaddik of Leib Saras once came to a certain town, and he stayed by a person over Shabbos, and before he left, he asked the person, can I give you a bracha? Can I help you with anything? And the man said, no, I have everything my heart desires. So Leib Saras says, maybe I can help you in Ruchnius, maybe I can help you do tshuva. Think, maybe you did a certain Aveira and I can help you do tshuva. And the man began to think, and he says, yes, Rebbe, I have one Aveira that I can think of. Last Friday night, by Lechem Mishnah, I forgot to make a scratch in the challah before I cut it. And the Leib Saras said to him, that's the only Aveira you can think of. By the way, how did you get this house? And the man went on to say a whole story which we won't elaborate on now. But the bottom line was that he once passed by this huge estate, and he went to the farmer, and he said, can you sell it to me? And the farmer said, no, it was an inheritance of his father. And he came back very hurt, so he returned once more, and he said, I'll offer you double, I'll offer you triple, and the farmer literally threw him out. And seeing how distraught this person was, because he failed to buy the field, so one of his workers went, and he poisoned the farmer's cows. And everything started rolling downhill afterwards. The farmer without the cows, he couldn't produce enough milk to make a living, he couldn't make his payments, and he almost lost the whole villa. And this person, whom Leib Saras was talking to, came running back, and he said to him, you know, your creditors are going to take everything away from you, I'll still buy the farm for the original price. And he says to Leib Saras, can you imagine what a fool he is? I told him I'll still buy it for the original price. He was about to be thrown out. I could have waited for his creditors to take it away, and I could have bought it back in an auction for nothing, for a song. But me, being that I'm such a big tzaddik, I offered him the same offer. And when he said no, he said, you know what? I'll give you triple the price, even though I could get it for almost nothing. Because that's the kind of person I am. And at the end was he refused, and he lost his farm, and he became so sick he even died. Can you imagine such a fool, he told you, Leib Saras. Anyhow, that's how I got the villa, because the creditors took it away, they put it up on the auction block, and I bought it. So Leib Saras told him, you know what you just did? You know how many Averas you were over? The man died from his sorrows. His blood, the pain of his wife and children are all in your hands. And the man began to rationalize. What did I do wrong? I offered him money for the farm. I didn't steal anything from him. That my worker poisoned his cows, I didn't instruct my worker to do so. Anyhow, Leib Saras straightened him out and made it clear to him that there's really nothing left of his Olam Haba unless In turn, he would now commit himself to support the man's wife and children and do whatever was in his power to try to rectify the situation, and literally be maskir all of his money to help others, and then perhaps he would be zeicha to some sort of a tshuva. And at the end, Reb Leib Saras reminded him, but when I ask you what aveira do you have on your hands, what do you have to worry about when you come up to the Olam HaEmes? The only thing you can think of is, well, I forgot to make that scratch before I cut the hamaitzi. You're supposed to indent the chal a little bit to see where you're going to cut. This person was extremely lucky. He had a schus. Because there are many others like him who are going around thinking, I really should do tshuva on my aveira of not making the scratch on the challah, when there is blood on their hands. The worst kind of blood. The blood that they're never going to think. They were the ones that shed this blood. They'll just step over it and say, Ich bin a shayna yid, I did nothing wrong. By the Dar HaMabel was worse. Because you didn't have an individual like this. You had an entire generation that was being bred this way, that was instructed. Here are your rules, the teacher would say to the class. There's right and there's wrong. Wrong is to steal a whole handful of peas out of someone's basket. Right is to steal a half a handful, because then it's pachas mishava pruta, you're not liable. That's how these children were being raised. That's how the whole generation viewed life. The Hamas was indicative of why they murdered, of why they were even the worst of areas of immorality, of avodah zarah. It was all rationalized. It all had a cheshbon. They were all tzaddikim, and that's why it was Kates Kol Basar Ba Lefanai. Because the Chet was only Lefanai. If not for the concept of Hamas, then a Kadosh Baruch Hu would have waited for them to do tshuva. But when you think that you're only aveiva is a scratch on the challah, you're not going to do tshuva. And therefore, Chazal say, Lo nechtam gzar dinam ela al chamas. It was this idea of chamas that finished off the Dar HaMabel, that rendered them hopeless. Now there's a pasuk in Tehillim, Kapitel Hey Pasuk Zayin. Ta'abei doivei chazav, you will bring destruction to those who utter deception. Ish damim umirma yisoyev Hashem. The Rebbeinu Shalom detests the man of murder and deceit. Ta'abei doivei chazav, the Medrash that refers to the Dar HaMabel. Now, the pasuk says what the Dar HaMabel did wrong. Why does David HaMelech introduce a whole new idea over here? Doivei chazav, that they lied. What's wrong with all of the aveiros that the pasuk says they did? And the answer is David HaMelech is not introducing a new aveiro, lying, to the list of Gili Arayas, Shvichas Dam, Avodah Zarah, and Chamas. David HaMelech is explaining their mannerism, how they did those aveiros. Doing those aveiros within itself would have not caused the Kadosh Baruch Hu to destroy them. But they lied to themselves, saying that they were doing nothing wrong. And that's why in the very same pasuk you have Ta'abei Doivei Chazav Ish Damim Umirli Yisoyev Hashem, that the Rebbeinu Shalom detests the murderer. Now David HaMelech is talking about people that are lying. Isn't it sort of a broad jump from lying to murder? And the answer is no, this is precisely the point. We're not just saying the person lied. We're saying the person is living a lie. And when you live a lie, then one can commit murder and still lie to himself that he's a tzaddik, that his only aveira is the way he cuts the chal. Same story, man came to the Chavetz Chaim, some say to the Kaska, not a stira, could have happened to both. And the parent was complaining, what am I going to do with my son? I can't get him to learn, I can't get him to daven, I've hired tutors for him, I've punished him, I've rewarded him. I'm at wit's end, what am I going to do? What's going to be with my son? And the tzaddik told him, you know what's going to be with your son? He'll be the same as you are. He's going to worry about his son. How am I going to get him to learn? How am I going to get him to daven? But he himself is not going to spend too much time learning and davening. Your son will be just like you. So don't worry so much about your son. In other words, the best chinuch is not to tell the son to do it, but for the son to see the way the father himself is doing it. And it'll rub off. Eila told us Noach. Noach is tzaddik. Eila told us Noach. Here are the children of Noach. So the Torah should have then enumerated the children of Noach. Instead, the Torah goes on to say that Noach was a tzaddik. And one of the answers is that the ikar children of tzaddikim, says Rashi, is not so much who their physical, biological children are, but it's their ma'asim tovim, it's their good deeds. So the Welt says of art. Iker Masayim Shel Tzadikim. How did Tzadikim really portray Yireh Shamayim and Kedusha to others? Not by giving fancy speeches and sermons, but by creating a role model, by acting sincerely in their own right to the point where people see them and they want to emulate them and they want to follow them. Iker told the same Shel Tzadikim. How are children mashpiyah the proper chinuch for their children? Ma'asim tovim, through their own good deeds. If a child sees a father come home after a hard day's work and he sits down to learn, if a child sees a father write out a check for a tzedakah when he knows things are difficult in the house, that will leave a lasting impression on him. And the emes is, this very first Rashi in the Sedra, essentially is the Hagdamah to the whole Dar HaMabel. What separated Noach from everyone else was not the way they talked, not the way they gave sermons, not the way they dashened. In that light, everyone was dressed like a tzaddik. Everyone spoke like he was the biggest tzaddik. But Noach really was a tzaddik. Noach was sincere with himself, analyzed every act that he did, and he said, would these fall under the category of Ma'asim tovim? And that's why he stood above the rest. Noach did not have his first child until he was 500 years old. The pasuk says, "V'Noach ben chamish me'as shana," and only then v'yeled Noach es Shem es Cham v'yas Yafet. Even by the standards of those generations, this was quite late in life. Most people had children when they were a mere 100 years old. And the Medrash asks why. Matan kol ha'dayros halidu lekuf shana. Everyone else seemed to be ready for the next generation at 100. V'zel tufkaf, and by Noach it was 500. So Rav Yudin in the Medrash answers as follows. Omar HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Who are Noach's children going to be? Im Rishayim, if they're going to be wicked, so what's the point of them having children? They're going to be lost in the water. And it's not going to be good for the tzaddik. On the other hand, if they're going to be tzaddikim, so if he's going to have a 500-year head start, or 400 years, there could be hundreds and hundreds of grandchildren. One teva wouldn't be enough. They'd have to build a whole fleet of arks. And it's not fair to do that to Noach, to burden him so much. So therefore, his first child came when he was 500 years old, and as a result, Yefes, his oldest son, was under 100 by the time the Mabul came, and he was not royally oynish yet. Because relatively speaking, in those days, one had at least 100 years to get mature, to become completely responsible for one's actions. And Yefes would be younger than that. He would be under 100 by the time of the Mabul, and therefore, he would automatically be allowed in regardless of whether or not he was worthy of it. Akopanim, we see that children come when it's the right time for the person to have children. We don't know what HaKadosh Baruch Hu's cheshbonos are. But in this case, the Medrash does give us the reason. It would appear that the reason is a very, very difficult one to understand. The reason Noach didn't have any children before he was 500 years old is because in case they were tzaddikim, he would have to build all these tevos for them. And why burden him? Noach had 120 years to build these tevos. He procrastinated with his own teva for 120 years, hoping that people will get the message and understand why he's building a teva year in and year out. And is this considered a tircha? A person is burdened by this? Oh dear, I have to build all of these tevos to save all of these grandchildren. I mean, wouldn't we think Noach would be elated more than happy? Wouldn't he shep nachat to have so many grandchildren and build tevos for all of them? To have a huge fleet of surviving descendants? That would be a burden. In terms of all the work, he had all these grandchildren to help him. Just the opposite. It would have been easier for him. How do we explain this medrash? Dr. Chaim Shmulevitz, the medrash over here is teaching us a moyedike yesod. But first, the Sichas Musar points out different places in Tanakh to give us an insight as to what building the teva really meant. We find in Tanakh that Elisha had sent his servant Gehazi with his stick. The instructions for Gehazi were to place the stick on the child who had passed away, and the child will come back to life. How does a stick bring someone back to life? The answer is not the stick. A tzaddik has a tremendous kayach, a tremendous influence on his environment. A tzaddik imparts his kedusha, his mesirus nefesh, the miraculous power straight from the heavenly realms, not only into people that are around him that are willing to accept it from the tzaddik, but even to articles that are around him, even to pieces, even to a stick. And this was a stick that Elisha had given to Gehazi with instructions to place it on the child. However, explains the Chaim Shmulevitz, the same way the tzaddik has a koyach to inject a kedusha into his environment, including sticks, one who mocks it can make it void of that kedusha. And that's what Gehazi did. Gehazi took this stick, and as he was walking, he was laughing. And he told whoever he met, Chazal tell us, you're never going to believe what I'm supposed to do today. I'm supposed to put this stick down, and it's supposed to bring a child back to life. Can you believe it? Chiyas v'neisim in a stick? And the stick taka didn't work. It didn't work because Gehazi, through his skepticism, more than skepticism, through his outright ridiculing the kedusha of the tzaddik, he drew the kedusha out of the stick. We find that Shmuel HaNavi had a little me'il. His mother, Chana, the great tzaddikus, the mother that teaches us the inyan of tefillah and davening to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, she, upon bringing her little son to the Beis HaMikdash to stay there for the rest of his life, that is, to completely donate him to Klal Yisrael, so to speak, she made for him a me'il katan, this little cloak, this little garment. And it appears Shmuel HaNavi would wear this me'il his entire life, even afterwards, that is, even after his life. When Shaul HaNavi brought the neshama of Shmuel back down because he was desperate and found no answer amongst Nevi'im, amongst the Urim V'Tumim, he knew it was Shmuel because Shmuel was wearing that me'il. Even in Olam Haba he was wearing that special me'il. Was this the same me'il that his mother made for him when he was 2 years old? The Yalkut Shmuel says yes. U'me'il katan tasel imai tana ha'me'il by Gadol, he was raised with it, by Mikvah, he was buried with it, by Allah. He went into Olam Haba with it, and when he had to come down to this world again, he still had the me'il on. In other words, this special garment that his mother made for him grew along with him all the days of his life, even in the life that lasts forever, the real life. It's sort of like we find in the Dar HaMidbar, explains Chaim Shmulevitz. The clothes grew along with them. But for the Yidden in the Midbar, we understood why they would need this special mace. No clothing stores in the Midbar, no cleaners in the Midbar. Well, why did Shmuel HaNavi need this miracle? And the answer is Shmuel HaNavi had to be raised b'dafka in this me'il. His nefesh was kosher in this me'il. It meant so much to him. All of her tears, all of her tefillos, all of her love, her whole heart, Chana HaNaviya put into this me'il cotton that she put onto her son. The me'il absorbed all of its emotion, all of its kiddusha, all of its purity, all of its sitkus. It was a source, it was a wellspring of love and chesed. When Shmuel HaNavi put this me'il on, his heart was inflamed with the Ahavas Yisrael, the Ahavas HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It knew no end. Shmuel HaNavi never would give up this me'il. It had to grow along with him. When he would travel from town to town to bring Klal Yisrael to the Dvar Hashem, he wanted this level of Ahavas Yisrael that his mother implanted into his very essence to be the source of his Ahava. It was the reason for the Ashura Tashchina on him. Reb Chaim Shmulevitz does not bring this, but there's a story told of us that Ebed HaMelech, who had a son that was not a particularly easy child, and people were saying, what's going to be with this child? He's so wild, and that Ebed HaMelech said, don't worry. And when it came time to make his clothes for his bar mitzvah, that Ebed HaMelech asked the tailor, call me. And the tailor called him. And before he sewed the sleeve to his bar mitzvah suit, that Ebed HaMelech took the sleeve and he began to cry and cry until the tears drenched it through and through. He did the same for the other sleeve. He did the same for his pants. He did the same for his hat. He did the same for his entire bar mitzvah outfit. When the child put on that bar mitzvah outfit, he suddenly became a whole different kind of a person. Getting back to another example that the Sichos Musar brings, the Gemara says in Masechtas Yuma, Nikner went to purchase doors for the Beis HaMikdash. It was not an easy thing to do. He traveled to Alexandria, Shal Mitzrayim. In Alexandria, he labored hard with great mesirus nefesh. He was able to make these two big copper doors. En route back, there was a terrible storm. And the sailors had no choice but to take one of the doors and toss them over. But that wasn't enough. The ship was still rocking back and forth in the waves, and so they picked up the other door to toss it over into the ocean. This time Nickner said, if you throw this door overboard, throw me with it. At that point, the storm settled down. Everything was peaceful and calm. But Nickner still felt bad about the one door that was thrown over. When they got to the port in Arkoi, the other door came floating to the top. So you have here a double nest. You have the nest that the copper floated and that it went along with the ship the whole way. Why did this happen? Dr. Chaim Shmulevitz, because of the Mesilas Nefesh that Nickner put into these doors. Later on, when they switched all the doorways to gold, when they were able to afford it, they left these doors, these were the main doors. The Shari Nickner, they left it as copper because they represented the Mesilas Nefesh, the tireless devotion and self-sacrifice that Nickner put into these doors for the kavod of Hashem, for the kavod of the Shekhinah, to bring Klal Yisrael closer to the Rabbeinu Shalom. It wasn't the copper, it wasn't the doors. It was the person who made them. The Pasuk tells us one was not allowed to pick up swords to cut the Mizbeach. Why? Because the Mizbeach was created to be Marach, Yom of Shalom. It extends life. And the iron was created lekatzer Yom HaShalom, to shorten life. Ein ze bedin sheyunaf mekatzer lanach. Furthermore, the Mizbeach is mapul shalom ben Yisrael avim shebashamayim. Therefore, no koyres u'mechabel, no destructive forces should be allowed on it. Now, do guns kill, or is it the people who fire them? It's the person who holds the sword that does the killing. Why do Chazal refer to the iron as the mekatzer or the mechavel? The Torah says the Sichas Musar that there is Seach who holds onto this weapon and uses this weapon as his pride and glory. This is his Koyach HaRetzicha. He implants a Koyach HaRetzicha into the Barzel. It's no longer considered just a piece of metal. It's considered something destructive. It's considered something negative. The iron itself becomes the Mekatzer Yom of Shalada, especially when you compare it to the Mizbeach, which represents exactly the opposite. That was created with the Koyach Laharach Yom of Shalada. That is the Koyach of the Mizbeach through its power of Kapara. These two things are diametrically opposed to each other. They cannot be brought together. Incidentally, Chazal tell us the Zan Shadei Mikdash Hayakayam, says of Chaim Shmulevitz, the Mizbeach was Mechaper al Adam. Now that we have no Beis Mikdash, the table of a person is Mechaper on him. So says the Gemara in the Sechtes Menachos. Rashi explains the table that provides Prusali Arche, a table that provides for poor people. Think about this. There were people that asked that their table should be cut up and they should be buried in it. The table that they learned on, the table that they davened on, the table that they provided for Archim on it. It's no longer just a table. The table that represents Ma'aseh Tzedakah and Chesed becomes a Mizbeach Kapara. It becomes part and parcel of the Bailim. It's the focus of the entire household. It represents the Kiddusha of the household. With all this in mind, let's get back to the Teva that Noach built. Al pi derech HaTeva, the Teva should have not endured the heat, the pressures of the Mabel. Of course it was Ma'aseh Nisim. But who was the catalyst for those Nisim? Noach. Noach didn't just build the Teva for 120 years like a carpenter that would plan and organize a huge ship. The Teva was built in with the power of Goyal Mashiach. Every day that Noach built that Teva, he was risking his life. The Rishoyim of the generation were not happy with this. They mocked him, they laughed him, they threatened him. And together with this Mesiras Nefesh came a hope and a longing that indeed the world should do tshuva. All of this became part of the Teva that would create the haven for his family to survive. And this can only be done, this kind of a Teva could have only been made if Noach the Chvoidai Ubi Atzmai would have built it. And that's the Lashon of the Medrash. Had Noach had too many people to put into the Teva, in Tzadikim Heim, so a Triachol of Las's Teva's Harba, Allah, Dafka, only Noach could have built the Teva. He could have not hired help. Only Noach had the ability to inject this kind of Mesiras Nefesh. And we have to stop and think, says the Chaim Shmulevitz. If a doimim, wood, sticks, table, clothes, ships. If they can be makabel this koyach nifla through Mesiras Nefesh, how much more so do people have an effect on each other when one lives a life of Mesiras Nefesh? How much more so can we inject ahava and commitment to another human being? Take note, says Reb Chaim Shmulevitz. Chazal tell us Moshe Rabbeinu had 10 names. In Amalei HaKadosh Baruch Hu LaMoshe Chayecha, Yikol Shema Shenikolach Eina Koyre Ela B'Shem Shekarasicha Basya Bas Parai. Basya called him Moshe. His name is Moshe. She called him Moshe because she pulled him out of the water. Kimin Amayim Mishasu. We can learn from here, says the Medrash, the great schar of Gemilas Chesed. Because the other names of Moshe Rabbeinu weren't simple names. They were names that described his greatness. He was called Yorad because he brought the Torah down L'mal L'mata, or he was Mamshech HaShor HaShechina. He was called Avigdor because he was the father of the Goydrim, of those who created fences. He was called Chaver because he was Mechaber Klal Yisrael. He connected them Lavim Shebashanayim. He was called Avisoicha. He was the father of all Nevi'im. All of these names represent Nevuah, Torah, Kedusha, the entire spectrum of Moshe Rabbeinu. And yet, what is the name that we refer to him as? Kimin Amayim Mishasiyu. Basya risked her life to take him out of the water. His name is Moshe. A name represents the essence of the person. Really, Basya just pulled him out. The terraces. By pulling him out, Moshe Rabbeinu would survive. His survival was based on an act of Gemilas Chesed. That Gemilas Chesed, in the face of the greatest adversity and greatest danger, became the symbol of Moshe Rabbeinu's life. More than the symbol, it became the power of his life. It represented the Mesiras Nefesh that he had with Klal Yisrael. Whether it was standing before Paroi, whether it was coming up to Shemayim and pleading on their behalf at his own expense, the name Moshe is to emphasize to us Moshe survived as a baby because of Mesiras Nefesh. As a result, Mesiras Nefesh became part of his life. He was made with Mesiras Nefesh. And it's interesting to note, Chaim Shmulevitz also points out, the Pasuk says, V'yata kach lecha mikol machal asher yeyachol v'yasafta elecha, v'yelecha olehem li'achla. The Kli Yakar explains, lecha mishalecha. Noach had to personally finance all of the food that would be prepared for the table. So he explains that was to make sure there would be no shash of gizela in it. Gizela was the undoing of the Dor HaMabul. The table would not survive with Gizela. But Reb Chaim Shmulevitz says there's a tifur of art over here. Noach was committed to keeping all the people and the animals alive in the table the entire 12 months. It required a superhuman schedule. He was personally wounded by the lion. The Mefarshim explain you needed around-the-clock Mesiras Nefesh for Chesed in order to be able to survive. It was in that chus that the world survived, that there was a kiyum to the world. People think, says Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, who do you really like? Someone who helps you. It's exactly the opposite. Who do you really like? Someone that you help. The Teva Habriya is, the more you invest in someone else to try to help him, then the more you have a cheshik to want to see him succeed, to want to see him survive. People that help you, yes, you like them, but it's a havat liyavadavar because you want to be helped again. You want to take advantage of it, but it's not a real love. Real love is you helping someone else. The more you give, the more you want to give. The fact that Noach took all of his own money to prepare for the food, that was preparing Noach. That Mesiras Nefesh. That he was giving it from himself. That instilled with him a love and a cheshik to be able to take upon this seemingly insurmountable task, unachievable goal. Because the more you invest in something, the more you want to see it through. And here we have a tremendous lesson in the Ahavta L'Reacha Kamaycha, not to wait what you receive, but to see what you can give. Because the more you give, the more you want to give. The Dubna Maggid said the following mashal. There was a certain town in Europe where, interestingly enough, you had two houses on the block. One was a huge villa, a palace, fountains in front of it, beautiful gardens and orchards. A very, very rich person lived there. And right next to it, the only other house on the block was an old, broken-down shack. He also lived over there. So once, A mailman comes walking down the block delivering a package. He was new to the neighborhood, and he walks through the huge, beautiful gates, admires the orchards, and knocks on the door of the rich house. And he says, "Does Reb Yossel live over here? I have a package for him." The servant who attended to the door began to laugh. He laughed so hard that the mailman couldn't figure out what he had said, which was so funny. "Reb Yossel, does he live over here?" So he pointed down the block to the little broken-down shack and said, "That's where Yossel lives. This is the house of the Gavir, of the richest man in the whole country." As the mailman walked out, the rich man who was passing by and noticed the scene summoned the Misharis, and he said to him, "That is no way to talk. Yossel is our neighbor, and even though he has no money and he lives in a broken-down shack, that is not a reason to have laughed when someone came to deliver him a package. You could have simply said Yossel lives down the block. You didn't have to make it sound like how dare him confuse Yossel with us. Why put down a man when it's not necessary?" The servant swallowed hard and apologized. He promised to address people with more respect in the future. Several days later, a reputable shacter came to the house of the rich man by appointment. They sat down in the den. The servant stood there attending to them, bringing drinks and so on. And the rich man got right to the point. He was looking for a shidduch for his daughter. The shacter thought for a couple of moments, and he suggested, "How's about Yossel, who lives down the block? He's not married, you know. He lost his wife several years ago. I think he's a fine man, Yossel. What do you say?" And the Gavir began to laugh. He said, "What's the matter with you? What kind of a shachan are you? Do me a favor. If you have anything serious to suggest, come back. If not, please don't waste my time." And he escorted the shachan to the door. The servant stood there, and there was somewhat of a smirk on his face. And the Gavir asked him, "What are you laughing about exactly?" The servant apologized. He said, I just said I see a bit of hypocrisy over here. The mailman knocked on the door, and he wanted to deliver Yossel's package over here. He asked, "Does Reb Yossel live here?" I laughed. And then you said, "Why did I laugh? Why am I treating Yossel in such a derogatory way? Why couldn't I just say, no, he doesn't live here, he lives down the road?" Well, you did the same thing. Why couldn't you just say to the shadchan, "Well, Reb Yossel is not for my daughter. Find someone else." Why did you have to laugh? Why did you have to get so excited? So the Gavir said to the servant, "I beg your pardon, don't you see the difference? I don't look down at Yossel because he's alone, because he's poor. And there is absolutely no reason for me to laugh at him or for any of the people who work for me or who represent me to treat him in any disgraceful way whatsoever. The facts speak for themselves. So if someone knocks on the door, you don't have to laugh and say, Yossel wouldn't live in this house. But over here, we're dealing with a shadchan who is trying to find a shidduch for my daughter. And he suggested something that was totally off the wall, no shaykhus whatsoever. I had to jump up and explain to him that this is an absurd suggestion, and that if he can't figure out what I would want, he should please not bother coming back. If I didn't do that, if I merely said, Yossel, well, I don't think he's for me, then I'll come back with a different kind of shidduch, which would be equally as absurd. So it was extremely necessary for me to emphasize to this person what exactly his job is when it comes to find a shidduch for my daughter. So I express myself, whether right or wrong, but at least I can tell you that I express myself in that manner of surprise. But in your case, you were dealing with a mailman who had no shaykhus. It wasn't important to instruct him. It wasn't important to emphasize to him the distinction between this house and Yossel's house. And therefore, the smile, the smirk on your face when you said, no, this is not Yossel's house, was completely unnecessary. Now, the Gemara tells us in the Masechtas Pesachim, a person should never say anything disgraceful. The Torah gave us 8 extra words as the Gemara makes a cheshbon in the Masechtas Pesachim. When the Torah instructed Noach to take in the non-pure animals, the Torah said, instead of simply saying, because if you don't have to use the word tameh, if you don't have to define something as tuma, then don't. But if you were to count up how many times the pasuk actually uses the word tameh, it would amount to many, many times. how come every single time the pasuk instructs us about which animals are kosher and which animals are not kosher, the pasuk doesn't say there as well, umin habehema asher eineno tahora, as opposed to umin habehema tameya? And the answer is as follows. Here, the Torah is telling us what happened by the Mabul. The Torah is telling us what Noach had to do. The Torah is not giving us instructions. We don't have a mitzvah to build a teva and to take an animal. As a result, it's like the mailman. The pasuk is telling us what happened. And when you're telling someone a story, it is not necessary to refer to someone or something as tameh, even though that person is tameh. If all you're doing is giving someone directions, if all you're doing is telling a story, then you refer to the individuals, you refer to the characters in the most delicate way possible, for their sake and for your sake. In other instances, where you have to give someone a blatant warning and you have to define clear guidelines, and you have to say this is good for you and this is poison, so you don't beat around the bush. That's not the time to be delicate. Then you say, as the Torah does, Tameh hu lechem, this animal is Tameh. The emphasis, the avodah of every Yid, is to break his teva, l'shem shemayim. There are those of us that by nature scream and yell and get ticked off, so to speak, over the smallest thing. Our avodah is to suppress that and to express ourselves in the most calm, natural, delicate way. And then you have others that have the opposite problem. By nature, they are very delicate. By nature, they are very soft. And as a result, when it comes to giving mussar, when it comes to screaming, stop, it can't go on this way, they allow it to pass. Because they don't have the courage within themselves to take on the confrontation. And many times in the course of their lives, they are taken advantage of because they simply don't have it within them to scream when it's necessary to scream. I remember many years ago, a Colombian airliner unfortunately crashed right outside of Kennedy Airport, and no one survived. And it crashed for the strangest reason. It ran out of gas. This airliner had circled Kennedy Airport a couple of times and requested an emergency landing. So I remember as the reports came out and they went to the air traffic controllers and said, Gewalt, why didn't you let him land right away? The pilot told you he is low on gas, he has to land. You realize how many lives were lost? So whoever's in charge of determining the priority of who gets to land first said, you're just quoting his words. Listen to his words. So when they played back the tape from the black box, he proved his point. Because the pilot said, I'm low on gas. Maybe you can allow me to land a little bit ahead of the other planes. And when he repeated it again the second time, he repeated it in more or less the same tone. So everyone tries to make an emergency a little bit more than it is in order to get to land first. That's why people call for appointments by doctors and try to aggravate a situation in order to determine or impress upon whoever it may be that is screening the appointments, and my appointment comes first. So everyone always says they're low on gas. But after a while, you get a feel for it. There are people who say we're low on gas, we have to land first. And there are those who say, we're running out of gas, let us land. Had he said it the second way, with that volume and that intensity, trust me, he would have landed before he crashed. But he didn't say it that way. So the politeness of that pilot, please let us land, we're running low on gas, cost the lives of 110 people. There are mitzvahs in our lives, even though we are not natural screamers, and we run from confrontation like from the plague, which indeed we ought to, but there are times where our Nisayan is to have to face up to the challenges. And that is the lesson that the Pasuk gives us. There are times that you have to say, Tameh hu lechem. And by the same token, when there is no crisis, the Nisayan of the Yid is, even if your particular tendency is for the volume of your voice to rise to the top as soon as something goes wrong, and your anger bubbles from within you, to suppress the, let me in right now, to, can you kindly open the door? That's a different Nisayan. And that is where Yid needs the siyata d'shmaya, to know when to scream and when not to. To know when to say, Behema asher einena tahira, and when to say, Tameh hu lechem. And not listening to either of these instructions. Saying Behema asher einena tahira when you're supposed to scream Tameh, and screaming Tameh when it would suffice to say Behema asher einena tahira, Both of these mistakes can destroy the quality of life, if not life itself. And what's really sad is often you have relationships, whether it's between spouses, employers, employees, teachers and students, parents and children, in-laws, whatever the case is, where the nature of one is to be very complacent and the other is on a very high energy level, and each one feels about the other one that that person is impossible. And that's such a pity, because people say opposites attract. Opposites can be very, very beneficial because each one sees the other side of the coin, sees the other kind of personality, and if people are willing to adjust, to listen, to learn, to give, then you become a better person. Then the screamer learns how to talk polite when you're talking to the mailman. And the delicate person learns how to scream when you have to say it's tummy, don't touch it. And in a way, this is the chet of the Dar HaMabel. The Dar HaMabel, as Chazal tell us, married two wives. One wife was for cleaning the floors, having children, diapering, mopping, cooking. And the other wife was for buying her fine clothes, for self-gratification. They wanted one wife to take care of all the practical things so the world can go on, so the house can be kept, so the food should be prepared. For that wife, they would apply the Tamei Hu Lechem, they would yell, they would scream, they would bark orders. And then they wanted another wife so they can be polite, so they can be the nice guy, so they can go out and show off. So what were they really saying? They were really saying is, I don't have to adjust myself from the overriding attitude of always being nice, occasionally to have to be stern. I don't like that. I would much rather have one person that can vent my frustrations, that bark orders and scream and yell all the time. I would much rather take one person and turn that person into a schacter so that everything can be clean in the house. And then I'll have someone else entirely to go out and enjoy life with. Be polite, buy nice clothes, buy nice jewelry. This was the attitude of the Dar HaMabel. And it was in regard to this attitude that HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, if this is not going to be completely destroyed, the world will not have a kiyum. The world cannot last. This attitude, this union of the two wives personified their entire lifestyle. In a sense, this is the epitome of Hefkeris. They put themselves in a situation where you are not going to tell me how to suppress my emotions or how to direct my feelings. I want the best of both worlds, and let the people around me pay the price for it. And perhaps this is Rashi's message at the beginning of the Pasha. The Torah Akdaisha calls Noach a tzaddik. The Torah Akdaisha says, Tamim haya b'deraisa. He was complete. He was so wholesome. B'deraisa, in his generation. What does that mean in his generation? Sagt Rashi, Yesh Rabbi Seinu Dashem Ma'aseh L'Shvat. Some say this was a praise to Noach. Even in his generation, he was a tzaddik. Can you imagine what he would have been had he been in the generation of tzaddikim? He would have been a greater tzaddik. However, the Yesh Hashem Ma'aseh L'Gnai, some say the pasuk means this as a disgrace to Noach. B'deraisa, well, for his time, where tzaddikim were a rare commodity, or virtually not to be found, b'deraisa, for his time, he was considered a tzaddik. But had he been in the dar of Avraham Avinu, he would have not been considered a tzaddik. Doesn't it sound strange? I mean, here we have the first person of the Torah officially declares a tzaddik, and right away you have those that say, yeah, but it means that he's not really such a tzaddik. It just means for his time he's a tzaddik. Reb Chaskel Kuzma explained that really Rashi is telling us all of this, both pshatim, as a praise to Noach. Because the true tzaddik does not have everyone who likes him. The true tzaddik should have the majority of people who like him. But there has to be someone who is not happy with what he does. Because if every single solitary person is happy, that's a simon that the tzaddik may be more into public relations and chanufa than he is into doing the right thing or instituting the right kind of guidelines and hadrachas. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter once said, and of course you have to put this into context, but Rabbi Yisrael Salanter once said, a Rav with Mezillah Mishtarais Rafen, a Rav that nobody wants to throw him out, is Mishkar Rav. If every single solitary person in the Kehillah likes him, that's a sin, and that he's just out there to satisfy everybody, but he's not really trying to institute takanos. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter also said, aber a Rav l'maisa varf minei marais is nish kamensh. Of course, that depends who your balabatim are. But Rabbi Yisrael Salanter's message is clear. A Rav has to be in a situation where most people like him, but there has to be someone who's not satisfied. If not, he's not doing his job. If not, he's not demanding things from the kil. He's not trying to be mechanefin. Of course, the overriding attitude has to be one of love, one of respect. But someone out there has to be dissatisfied. If not, it's a simon he's not doing his job. He has to have the insight of how to bring that person around at the end. So the Torah is telling us over here, says the Chaskell Kozman, that Noach was a complete tzaddik. And let me define to you what a real tzaddik is. A real tzaddik is where most people dashin him l'shrach, most people are happy with him, most people feel the warmth of his good Shabbos, but there are others who are not happy with the things that he wants from them. Reb Chaim Vital once said to the Arizal, what is our avodah worth when you compare it to the avodah of Tanoim and Amiroim and our avos? So the Arizal told him, you'd be surprised. Given the Hastaras Panim, the difficulty of our generation, the frustrations, the difficulties in Amunah, the tremendousness Yoinais, our Amen Yeheshmei Rabbah, our Maisa HaChesed, our Tzedakah, our Blat Gemara, in a sense, has a certain chashivas. It's more chashiv to HaKadosh Baruch Hu than even those of previous generations. If someone from a previous generation would daven the way we daven or learn the way we learn, it wouldn't be considered anything. But for us, it is, because the Kadosh Baruch Hu knows the environment that we have to fight off. So the Nesiv Shalom explains, when Rashi says there were Yeshe Darshan Laisei L'Gnai, according to his generation he was a tzaddik, had this avodah been in the times of Avraham Avinu, it would have not been considered anything. We don't really mean this as a disgrace for Noach. Adarabah, we mean this as a praise to Noach. He lived at such a difficult time that even his avodah, whatever he was able to muster up for Kavod Shemayim, that was considered so great, that was considered so chashiv, like our Amen Yeheshmei Rabbah. True. Had he been in a different time, this avodah would have been nothing. But Adarabah, that's his greatness, that he was able to do whatever he was able to do, despite the overwhelming challenges of his time that always surrounded him. It is said that tzaddikim used to breathe easier when Parshas Bereshis and Noach were over and we made it to Parshas Lech Lecha. The analogy is sort of, we made it through the difficult journey, the difficult beginnings, and we're finally in our grandfather's house or tent. Throughout Parshas Bereshis and Noach, we see the beginning of humanity standing on very shaky moral establishments. With the exception of a few Yechidim, society at large, up until Abraham Avinu, falls on its face and clearly fails the test. It clearly flunks the challenge of initiating a world of love, peace, harmony, guided by Emunah in a Bari Olam. Think about this. What dominates Parshas Bereshis and Noach, besides, of course, for Brias Olam? Basically speaking, there are three major chatayim, three major sins that sort of span across Bereshis and Noach, each one connecting to the other. The Chet Eitzadas, subsequently the Chet of Cain, followed by the Dor HaMabel and the Dor HaFloga. Now, if we indeed are so anxious to get to Avraham Avinu, so why does the Torah demand of us to learn Parshas Bereshis and Noach every single year? And why does the Torah want us to study these chatoim, these three major averos? Why can't we just start on safe ground in our grandmother Sarah's house? What do we learn from the Chet Eitzadas that is nogeya to the Klolius of Klal Yisrael? The whole Bri is waiting for the tikkun of the Chet Eitzadas. What do we learn from the Chet of Cain? And what can we apply to our Dar? What lessons did the Dar HaMabel failed to apply to their Dar? I mean, after all, we can't be masakin the Chet of the Dar HaMabel. They distorted the world so bad that it had to be destroyed. But somehow, we must be linked to it if the Torah wants us to study it every single year. And why does the Torah want us to learn about the Chet Dor HaFloga? The Nesiv Soila, in really a beautiful beer, explains that understanding these Chetayim and understanding what the Torah wants us to learn from it and how to react to it is really the prelude of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. First of all, it should come to us as no chiddush that we have to go through this period of darkness before we get to our avos, That is how HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world. Night before day, Vahi Erev, Vahi Vaiker. Darkness always comes before the light. Or, as we find in the Sifrei Mekabalim, the Klipa, the shell, always comes before the Peri. And the Yid has to understand that this is true for our personal growth in Avdas Hashem as well. It's Sur Meirah, and only afterwards Asay Tov. Sometimes if you can't shake that Sur Meirah, you have to move first to the Asay Tov and get back to it later. But ultimately, there is a tunnel of Ra that you have to get through in order to reach the Asay Tov. And that is true for the Klal Yisrael Olam as well, explains the Nesiv Sholem. The Olam HaTikun began from Avram Avinu. He was Mesak in the world with his Midas HaChesed. Then comes Yitzchak, who was Mesak in the world with his Midas HaGvura. Yaakov with his Midas HaTiferes. And they indeed are the three pillars that hold up the world, and they are the reason for the creation of the world. Or, as the Zohar Kodesh explains, they are the three pillars that keep the world going. Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov are Torah, Avodah, and Gemilas Chasadim. Gemilas Chasadim is Avram Avinu, who personifies the Midas HaChesed. Yitzchak is the Amoidu Avodah, and Yaakov is the pillar of Torah. Like it says, Titain Emes LiYaakov, and Emes is Torah. However, to reach the levels of Torah, Avodah, and Gemilas Chasadim that the others have paved for us, we have to work our way respectfully through the three tunnels of Ra, tunnels of evil, to fulfill the Sur Meravi Asay Tov in the three respective categories. And those are the three Chatoim, the Chet Tzadas and the Chet of Kayin in one category, and then followed by the Dor HaMabul and the Dor HaFlaga. And let's see how each one relates to each other and how understanding and destroying each one respectfully is our stepping stone to the three others. Another way of phrasing the Chet Tzadas, Chet Kayin, Dor HaMabul and Dor HaFlaga is Kina, Taiva, and Kavod. We already know what the Mishnah tells us in Masechtas Avos are the three: jealousy, lust, temptation, and the unwarranted quest for honor. Mitzian es Adam min Olam simply rips a person out of this world. They say when the Imri Emes came to Eretz Yisrael and he visited one of the great Yerushalayim Rabbanim, he offered him a very hush of a seat oivenon by the table where everyone was standing around to watch the meeting. And the Imri Emes refused to sit down on it. And the Rav was a bit insulted. He said, look, this is the chair that I prepared for you. What right do you have not to listen to me? I mean, after all, don't you have kavod for the Mar the Asra? And the Imri Emes answered, characteristic of his rapid-fire, amazing wit. He says, Chazal tell us, Kol ma she'amalach balabayis say, whatever the balabas tells you to do, you're obligated to do. Chutz say, with the exception of leave. So the Rav said, am I telling you to leave? I'm telling you to sit down on this honorable chair. He told him, no, but Chazal tell us, Hakina, Taiva, and Kavod might see an Esa Adam in Olam. So you're sitting me on a chair, and you want to infuse me with Kavod, which is might see Esa Adam in Olam. Therefore, I don't have to listen to you because Kol Ma Shalom Lach Balabayis Say, Chutz may say. However, the Nesiv Shalom says, let's take a closer look. Chazal don't play with words. If Kina, Taiva, and Kavod are Mitzian Esa Adam in Olam, in other words, they can undo a person's very existence, that means that these are basically the worst thing that a person can indulge in. And here are seeds of destruction in either of the three categories, Kina, Taiva, and Kavod. Let's take a closer look. And we'll see that these are basically the three Chatoim that span Bereshis and Noach up until Avram Avinu, who charts a different course for the world. Kina, jealousy, that is the shorish of the Chet of Kain. It all started with jealousy. Kadosh Baruch Hu was Makabel, the carbon of Hevel, the Al-Minchas Kain Loisha. And that jealousy led to him killing his brother. Jealousy doesn't end with jealousy, the Torah is teaching us. If you don't fight it at its root, then jealousy leads to murder. That is the lesson the Torah wants us to learn. There are many different ways to murder someone. It doesn't necessarily have to be with a gun or a cannon. Jealousy leads to machlaikis, that robs sometimes a person of his parnasa, of shalom bayis in a person's house. All of that is tantamount to murder. It destroys people's lives and could force a person out of this world. This is the simple lesson that Torah wants us to learn from here. One of the Rishonim said that there is no greater poverty than jealousy, because it means that as much as a person has, he has nothing. Now, if you can't deal with that, then you have not finished Pashas Bereshis yet, and you're not ready for Noach. But understanding that entitles you to go on. to understand the chet of the Dar HaMabul, which is taiva. Hakina v'hataiva. V'hakavod. The Dar HaMabul is taiva simply ki hishchus kol basar darkei al haaretz. The Nesiva Shalom says the Pagam all began with looking at what they ought not to have looked at, the Yiru b'nei Elokim es b'noisa Adam, and that's where they fell to this matzav oyem v'noira, so that the entire world lost its license to existence. Again, the Torah is warning us, just like the simple jealousy cannot be dismissed, because the very next page is murder, the simple histaklis asurais, where a person has no regret, where a person is not careful, where a person considers his eyes totally hefker and he dismisses it as a humrah, and there's no need to be careful. The Torah warns us, again, what the very next page is. The chayas of the Oifos went down with the rest of the world. They don't have a Yetzirah, they don't have a Bechira. Yet the tumah was so great it automatically affected them. 3 tefachim of the ground was destroyed. The avia, the ear, up until 15 amas, up until 30 feet above the highest mountain was affected by the tumah. The entire bria became tummy beyond repair. And all of that started from the pagam of histaklis, of looking. Histaklis means steering, without any degree of reservation. The Torah was not given to angels, but a person has to try. They didn't try. And that's what the Torah teaches us, this explains the Nesiva Shalom. Simply to show us how close the two steps are together. How tight the distance between Taiva and Meitzina, so Adam and Olam, is a lot shorter than people think, and definitely comes a lot quicker than people anticipate. And afterwards we have the chet of the Dar Flaga. The pagam of the chet, Dar Flaga, is kavod. Come, let us build a tower, and let us get up to Shemayim, and let's show that Rabbeinu Shalom Kaviyachol, they said, who is boss. That is the klipa of kavod, which goes beyond any rationale and defies all logic. The drive for someone's name in lights, Roisha B'Shemayim, the Nasalon Hashem, again, is one step before Kadosh Baruch Hu scattered them over the face of the earth. Where a person thinks that he has to build for himself a tower so he can put himself on the highest pedestal possible at all costs. As long as people see his name, as long as he is boss, remember, you're just one step away from HaKadosh Baruch Hu scattered them from their Alpnei Kol Haaretz. So basically the Torah is teaching us the basic rules of life. If Kina Taiva V'Kavod is Metzinas Adam and Olam, so when the Torah teaches us about the establishment of the world, the Torah has to teach us what keeps us in the world. Here are the exit signs. Metzinas Adam and Olam. Now normally an exit sign is posted so a person can get out in an emergency. But sometimes the exit sign is there to teach us how to stay in and what to stay away from. And only after a person understands the dangers of kina, taiva, and kavod, and understands that in all 3 cases, they are natural instincts, they are part of us. The fact that we experience those emotions don't make us bad, it makes us human. But our avodah is to check it, is to try to quench it. And that's the hachana. That's how Bereshis and Eiches is a hachana for the story of the Avos. Bereshis is bria sa'olam, and the bria of a person with his emotions inherently teaches us that you are going to be challenged by all 3, kina, taiva, v'kavod. There's no way around it. The Kotzker said that really it breaks up into the 3 parts of life. The first part of your life, the battle is against taiva. During the Middle Ages, it's kina. How much money does that person buy his house for? How rich is his mechutin? And the last part of your life, it's kavod. Am I getting enough honor? And no one is immune, because you are a human being. You were created in Pashas Bereshis. And therefore you have the nesyonos of Bereshis and Noach. But the choice is, do you allow yourself to float away on it, or do we pick up that chayvus halavos and we work to fight it? The Zohar Kodesh says that Noach is merames on Shabbos. Noach, ultimate rest. Neichel le'eloi and the neichel le'teitoi. Shabbos Kodesh represents another tikkun for all of the pagamim. Noach was in a whirlpool of kina, taiva, v'kavod. The winds all around him. And he stepped into a teva and he was isolated, safe, and secure. A yid can also step into a teva, and that teva is called Shabbos. That's what the Zohar says. Noach is the lashon of minucha, b'Shabbos, b'minucha. And just like in the teva explains the Nesiva Shalom, you had 3 floors. Each was vital, each served its purpose. Shabbos also has 3 floors, and they are the 3 sudas of Shabbos. The first suda of Shabbos when the Yid sort of falls from the weekday into Shabbos, that is the smallest Madrega of Shabbos. Which is sort of ironic, because if you ask most people, definitely most children will tell you they feel the greatest spirit of Shabbos Friday night. Well, that's because of the contrast of weekday to Shabbos. But in reality, the three Sudas of Shabbos go in ascending order. The second Suda is greater than the first, and the third is greater than the second. As he mentioned earlier, he brings us from the Avudraham, the Rishon, that the 3 periods of Shabbos Kodesh is a prina of Nisuyin, of marriage between HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kaviyachol, and Klal Yisrael. Leil Shabbos Kodesh is the Kiddushin, Eliyat Mekadeshesli. That's when we say Ata Kedashta. The morning of Shabbos is the Nisuyin. Yismach Moshe B'matnas Chalkai. That's when the Chassan sends the presents to the Kala up until the time of Nisuyin. Shabbos Shudas is the highest level. It's the prina of the Yichud rule. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Nisyachet with Klal Yisrael. That's when we say in Shemay Nesrei, Ata Echad. So there are 2 ways to battle Kina Taiva V'Kavod. During the week we battle it, specifically Muslim, we battle it by getting out there and trying to do our best, because that's really all HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from us. We cannot do more than what we can try. But at one point, the Yid feels, I'm losing the battle. Everything is just sinking around me. And that's when Shabbos comes. And the Rebbeinu Shem says, okay, stop fighting. Just step into the table. Which is also during this time period of Bereshus and Noach, which is the worst madrega that mankind has sunk into. Dar Enosh, the whole Anushias of man was clashed in. Shabbos can take you out of that Tumah as well. Now this isn't just a play on words. This isn't just homiletically speaking. This is a Metzias. The Zohar HaKadosh says Noach is a Lashon of Menucha. The Teva drew on the Kiddusha of Shabbos to separate its inhabitants from the rest of the world, to spear them from the huge crater of Kina Taiva V'Kavod that everybody else was falling into. Now, if we didn't have to go through the process of Bereshus and Noach before Lech Lecha, if we didn't have to go through Kina Taiva V'Kavod in order to get to Torah Avodah and Gemolos Chasadim, there really is no purpose to the Bria. And that really explains why the rainbow is the sign of the Ois Bris. Pashut, the rainbow is pointed heavenward to show that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is turning the bow around, even though the world is worthy of the arrow. The Ber Shmuel says a very profound thought. What gives a rainbow its color? You have a storm, you have mist in the air. You have a cloud that sort of fills up the whole air, every single breath. And as the rays of the sun make their way through the cloud, you have all these different reflections and different colors. If there were no clouds in the air, all you had was the sun, then you see nothing of any kind of color. Zok the Ber Shmuel, the Tachlis Habriya is to know that Chafetz Chesed Hu, the Chafetz Lehetiv in Briyasa. The Rebbeinu Shem wants to be Mashpia, Rav Tov for those who listen to him, and the Rebbeinu Shem is willing to be Meichel and help those who want to return to him and do tshuva, even if he's not worthy of it. Toivu Neitiv L'Royim U'L'Toivim Erech HaPayim V'Rav Chesed. That's the Yud Gimel Midas Harachnim. That even though we're right after the Chet Egel, and we are guilty of the greatest betrayal possible, HaKadosh Baruch Hu still says that the elements of Bria are there, were in place, so that you can come back. So if you look at it this way, one could argue that if people didn't sin, you would never see the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Rachmim and Chesed. I mean, there's no Chiddush with someone who was Goimel Chesed with people that never sinned. So because there are sinners in the world, and the world is full of all sorts of dark clouds, and mist in the air is not clear, in a sense, here is the Hisgalus of the Kavod Hashem. We see the great Chesed of Hashem. The rays of the sun that come through the clear sky don't show us the colors, but the rays of the sun that come through the thick clouds show us that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is willing to take us back regardless, as long as we are at least looking to step into the Teva. So our instincts of Kina Taiva V'Kavod, and the fact that we're looking to do tshuva, and that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is willing to accept us, the fact that in our personal lives we have to live through the jealousy of Cain, a world of a Dar HaMabel, the questions of a Dar HaFlaga, and we have to work with this until we manage to step into a Teva, and only then reach Avam Yitzchak V'Yaakov. And the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has the patience to wait this out and to instill life in the Shorat HaShechina as we are going through our difficult times, as we work our way through Bereshus and Noach toward Lech Lecha. Here's where we see the Yud Gimel Midas Harachmim in all of its colors. And this represents the idea that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I will not destroy the world anymore. I will guide you out. And the emes is this opportunity was there for the Dar Mabul as well. When Chazal tell us that it was rain of blessing. And the Tzaddik brings from the Zohar even more so that it could have even been Kabbalah Satayra, the 40 days of Kabbalah Satayra. They were also receiving this message. You're not being destroyed because you have Kina Taiva the covered in you. Adarabba. Work it out and you will convert it to bracha. The message was clear to them, but unfortunately, they did not accept it, and that's why they never made it to Pashas Lech Lecha. We, as Hashem Yisbarach, will.
This shiur is distributed by Kolodas, 11 Stay Chemet Street, Yerushalayim. For donations, please call 02-5383-999. Fax 02-538-0267. Postbox 57035.